Welcome back to Cord Cutting Today, where we break down some of the biggest stories happening in the world of cord cutting, including PBS may be in some trouble as funding may be cut, while larger stations may be okay. Small rural PBS stations could be facing a hard time going forward. Cable TV companies are pushing back against the FCC and FTC, kind of testing the new leadership over there and seeing what they can get away with. They're asking for the ruling against click to cancel, which means they would have to make it easier to cancel their service, could be overturned, and they want the FCC to reconsider ownership limits that prevent them from owning several major broadcast channels in a single market. We also got some additional details on ESPN. These stories and a whole lot more coming up. It was a busy weekend in a quick second. First though, if you want to learn more about any of these stories, I'll put a link to each story in the show notes and in the first pinned comment so you can read them for yourself. If you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button or hitting that thumbs up. Doing one or both lets YouTube know you enjoy what we do here, so YouTube recommends our videos to more people. With that said, let's dive into it. All right, for almost 40 years now, PBS stations have been increasingly facing scrutiny, and NPR stations, but we focus more on TV, about the funding they get from the federal government. And while it's not a majority of their budget, it is hundreds of millions of dollars given to PBS and hundreds of millions to NPR. With this, back in the 80s, they were asked to find ways to raise revenue from other areas, and that's why you see a lot of the sponsored by messages that now appear at the end of shows and different things. Well, now, once again, they're finding themselves in the crosshair of both the FCC and Congress that are looking to cut its funding. And according to a report from the Los Angeles Times, that may not necessarily impact its bigger stations, but many rural stations heavily rely on this funding. Several PBS stations in the last 10 years or so have shut down. When I lived in Texas, we were one of the stations, my local one, shut down and stopped broadcasting over the air and just went out of business. It got replaced on cable by a Austin feed, which was like an hour away. But the free over-the-air broadcast was replaced by commercial feeds as the college that ran the station took the money for the repack and just shut down instead of actually transitioning to ATSC 3.0 and moving its bands. Many small PBS stations are struggling, not financially sustainable in their current setup. They rely on that federal government money. Now, though, there's increasing pressure for them to find ways to become more self-sufficient rather than handing over hundreds of millions of dollars to them every year. This is a touchy political situation. I don't want to get into a lot of political stuff with it, but it is a big question in 2025. I've seen a lot of people ask it. Is PBS still needed the way it once was with the information highway, as it's still called sometimes, and news sources for news, that is it still needed? And that's where I think Congress is going to have a big problem. Well, yes, PBS is probably not going away completely, but losing that funding would dramatically change PBS, and especially rural PBS, which makes up a vast majority of the PBS stations. A lot of them are very small, not profitable ones. You get outside big markets like New York and Detroit and Chicago and others, and even in some of those stations losing that fund could force them to shut down. What would that mean? Could we see just a national feed of PBS replacing all the small local ones? It's very possible. We'll have to keep a close eye on this, but PBS is seeing major changes in 2025. Mark no words, there probably is going to be a funding cut with this in the years to come. We'll keep a close eye on this story, let you know more as we learn about it. All right, next up, cable TV lobby groups are suing the FTC to block a click-to-cancel rule that would have made it easier to cancel cable TV. This is the first of two major pushbacks from cable TV companies we'll talk about. But several major trade groups have come together to sue the FTC to stop an announced click-to-cancel rule. And this rule basically says if you can sign up online, you need to be able to cancel online. Gym memberships are very notorious for this, right? You sign up for a gym membership for $10 a month, you use it, and then in 2 years later, 20 days later sometimes, you realize you don't want it. Well, to cancel it, you have to go in person to cancel instead of going and calling or going online to cancel. This also is for cable TV companies. A lot of it you can sign up online, but then you can't cancel online. And this FTC rule will force that to become a reality, making it as easy to cancel as it was to sign up. Now, though, these groups have sued, saying the FTC does not have the rights to change how they manage their cancellations with it. A lot of these companies rely on people who kind of forget about it, don't cancel, keep paying things even though they're not using it, especially gyms. It's hard to justify if everybody showed up that paid $10 a month for a gym membership, probably won't work. The vast majority of these people don't use it, making it all worthwhile. It'll be interesting to see how aggressive the FTC tries to fight this under the new leadership. What are their thoughts on it? We'll find out soon, but they're pushing back. Also, the National Association of Broadcasters has pushed back against FCC ownership limitations. The NAB represents a bunch of local broadcast TV stations, ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS, for example. Their independent owners are all represented by this trade group. With this, the FCC has a limitation how much of a single market you can own. 39% of its audience is the maximum per ownership per company. And this is roughly worked out to a 1 per market rule, which means you can only own one major broadcast TV station for the most part in a single market. Now you can, with different things, get around that a little bit. There's different ways to do it. And it does not necessarily mean you can't own smaller stations, a bunch of another retransmitter, a MyTV network or a CW affiliate, for example. But NAB is asking the FCC to reconsider this rule in a day and age of digital competition from things like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and the like. They say they need that lifted. It's hard for them to justify their business model with a 39% max ownership in a single market. We'll see how that plays out. Again, this is going to give us a good idea of where the FCC is going. What does that look like? We'll see. But for now, those are two big fights the cable TV and broadcast television industries are launching in 2025. All right, also, I'm going to race through a bunch of news because a lot's happened, but ESPN and Fox Sports have ended talks on a joint streaming venture, will instead launch separate streaming services. Now, last year they planned to launch Venue Sports, which was going to be a joint venture between ESPN, Fox Sports, and Warner Brothers Discovery. Now that died. ESPN has for a long time planned to launch what they call a flagship. This is a new streaming service that will offer ESPN channels direct without a cable TV subscription. According to a report from Puck News, reportedly, ESPN had been in talks with Fox on a joint venture that would have seen the two companies launch a streaming service together, and Fox content ended up in this new ESPN one. That has fallen apart. Fox is going to launch their own. ESPN will launch theirs too. We'll keep a close eye on this, but it's interesting to see what happens. This comes at the same time as Fubo has announced it plans to launch a smaller sports-only package after it merges with Hulu Plus Live TV. Now, this would have to happen first. It will probably be very similar to what we see with DirecTV's new sports-only package and Comcast's sports-only streaming service. Now, Fubo's details are very thin, other than to say it will include some broadcast networks. Details on that we're not sure, so some local TV stations, and a smattering of sports-only content. How long will that take? We'll have to wait and see. What will it cost? What channels will be included? We just don't know. But it's another small or cheaper package of channels coming out. Will these be successful in trying to turn around cable TV's decline and streaming's decline? We'll have to watch and see what happens with that. Next up, CBS Evening News is making some major changes. They had previously focused on updating their news to try to turn around ratings decline by going into what they called long format focus, where they would dive into a smaller number of news stories but give them each longer, in-depth looks. After a little bit more than a month of doing that, it seems to not be working, and CBS is now returning to a more short-form news broadcast, kind of like this, where in a 10-15 minute period you may highlight 4 or 5 big stories happening and just give them each a little bit of time. Comes as people are increasingly not watching news on traditional TV, instead going to streaming services, YouTube, websites, and the like to get their news. Be interesting to see how that plays out. Next up, Chromecast with Google TV is officially no longer for sale on Google and it's probably fully discontinued. When the Google Streamer 4K launched, they announced that the older Google TV Chromecast with Google TV, will continue to sell while supplies lasted. Seems like supplies have run out. I would be shocked if this comes back, but you could see a little return. Sometimes this happens when they run out, they'll find some additional stock or stock gets returned from their vendors. Sometimes they have deals in place when things get discontinued, they buy back stock and then Google may sell that out. We'll see. But for now, Chromecast with Google TV is officially a thing of the past. The future is the more expensive Google TV Streamer 4K. Both are basically the same thing, but just a more powerful device in the Google Streamer 4K versus the Chromecast with Google TV, which was slightly, let's be honest, underpowered. Not horribly, but slightly. All right, and last story up of the day. 28 years ago, last weekend, NBC made history by airing an unaltered version of Schindler's List in a move that at the time was kind of groundbreaking. It was an R-rated movie airing on February 23rd, 1997. At the time, you had never seen an unedited movie like this broadcast on TV. It was a major milestone. It raised some questions and concerns. Would the FCC complain about an unrated version of this movie being aired during prime time on a major broadcast network? But it was seen as such a cultural moment, it changed TV forever. That's what happened in TV history today. Well, that's it for today. Hey, I have a new microphone. I've been slowly investing in some new gear to try to make these broadcasts a little bit better. Hope you like this. Leave me a comment, let me know. If you like the audio, if you notice any difference. I noticed the old microphone was having some popping and crackling. Honestly, I'd had it for probably about 8 years. It moved up here with me when I moved from Texas 5 years ago. And I definitely noticed a big change with it. Well, that's it for today. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll be back again tomorrow with another video.